Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and we have a really big thing to cover here, and I'm going to give my own analysis and my own opinions on this specific player. And as you could see from both the title, the thumbnail, and the opening graphic here, we're talking about James Harden of the Philadelphia 76ers, the point guard they traded for from the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously was the big blockbuster at the trade deadline this year, and we're going to talk about exactly what's going on with James Harden. You can see here the quote from Joel Embiid. He's not who he was in Houston. Obviously not a great quote. This is back-to-back years in the playoffs after losing that Joel Embiid has thrown a teammate under the bus, did it with Ben Simmons, and now is seemingly doing it again with James Harden. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and also leave a like on today's video. This is going to be a very fun video for me to record, and one that I think is going to be quite contrarian to popular belief. But just hear me out on it, and I think I'm going to rationalize with you why we can't quit on James Harden. So what is exactly going on with James Harden? That's what we're going to cover in this video. And then the real question, should you doubt James Harden going forward? A lot of people, whether I say it or not, are going to doubt James Harden. So we're going to give my analysis, my opinions on why I think you either should or should not. So let's look at Harden's recent history with the 76ers, specifically this postseason, because this is really where it has stood out. This postseason with Philadelphia averaged a little bit under 19 points a game, only about 8.5 assists a game, just under 6 rebounds a night on 40.5% from the field. So not a good field goal percentage, about 37% nearly from three, which is actually a very good percentage, which brings more of an alarm to his low field goal percentage. And then 89% from the stripe. Obviously, James Harden knows what he's doing there at the stripe. And these numbers are quite concerning just from the actual statistic and analytic outlook, where, first of all, stats don't tell you everything, but this is pretty significant. For his career in Houston, he averaged roughly 28 points a game in the postseason. So to average less than 19 points this postseason, I understand why everyone is hitting the panic button. And when you look at the eye test, it is backed up with this. There's a lot of times this year where he just could not get by anyone on the perimeter, specifically with his handle. In the last decade, he's one of the top 3 ball handlers in the league. Him and Kyrie Irving are probably right up there 1 and 2, in my opinion. Because James Harden would consistently blow by everyone. We know how good he was with the tween between the legs, able to cross over and get downhill whenever he wanted to. That's what made him so deadly. Everyone looks at the free throws. Everyone loves to talk about the step back. Real people who know basketball, anyone who actually watches the game and understands how complex the sport is, knows that if you're able to get to the rim whenever you want, you're a great player. You think about all the great players in the league today. You look at the guys like Steph Curry, and yes, Steph Curry gets to the rim all the time. Luka Doncic gets to the rim all the time. Players like LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant, they get to the rim. Part of why Brooklyn struggled this past series against Boston in the first round was Boston stopped them from driving the basketball consistently and forced them into a ton of tough perimeter shots. And that's the issue with Harden right now. He's not getting by anybody, and he's, at this point, limiting himself as a scorer because he's not able to get to the rack with consistency. You see his free throw numbers go down a little bit because of that, but you also mainly see his shot attempts go down. The biggest thing here is it's hard to take a whole bunch of shots, specifically from 3, when you don't have your rhythm getting to the rim as well. So I think Harden kind of shied away from scoring the basketball. You also have to consider here, he's played about 20-ish games with this team before the postseason. So, and Doc Rivers, let's be honest about it, is not the biggest X's and O's guys. He's not the greatest offensive head coach. He doesn't reinvent the basketball. So James Harden, for me, it's a tough situation here because you look at where he's at and he just doesn't have that burst anymore. But in my opinion, let's not sleep on James Harden. Do not worry about him. He will be back. And I know this is a very unpopular belief, and a lot of you might be hating or writing hate comments right now. Trust me, hear me out. There's going to be a great explanation on why I believe that James Harden will be back to great all-star, maybe even all-NBA basketball, which is a very high standard to place upon a guy, because we're talking about being a top 15-ish player in the world. And I think Harden can at least get back to that top 20-ish range, which is a very high status to play at. And he's been doing it for over a decade, and I expect him to get back there. So let's start with a comparison time here. Let's flash back to the 2018 playoffs, and at age 32, remember 32 years old, Chris Paul sustains a hamstring injury, obviously a fairly serious one, against the Golden State Warriors while the Rockets were about to go up 3-1 in that series. We all know how that ended. The Warriors stormed back in that series, ended up winning. And the Rockets, of course, had that massive meltdown where they couldn't make a three for, I think it was 25 straight shots from the three-point line in that final Game 7. But that injury for Chris Paul was devastating, not only because Houston at that time had such a good opportunity to maybe make it to the finals and win one against that Cavaliers team that year, but it also really hindered Chris Paul's career and the status everyone looked at Chris Paul and the lens everyone looked at Chris Paul through. Remember, 2017-2018, his first year in Houston, look at the numbers. He averaged nearly 19 points a game, 8 assists a game, 5.5 rebounds on 46, 38, and 92 splits, which are elite splits. And by the way, Houston led the league in wins that year. So Chris Paul in Houston, first year with James Harden, that team was phenomenal. Then we go back to the next season. And remember, in 2018 playoffs, he sustains a hamstring injury. And then the next year, 2018-2019, still in Houston, all of his numbers regressed besides assists per game. Only averaged about 15.5 points a game. A little bit over 8 assists a game, so that number basically remained the same. Averaged basically 1 rebound less a game, and his shooting splits plummeted massively. Look at them, 46% down to 41.9%, 38 down to 35.8, and then 92 even down to 86 at the stripe. So massive downward fall for Chris Paul. And then he got traded to Oklahoma City because remember that offseason, everyone started labeling Chris Paul, even Tillman Fertitta, the Rockets owner, labeled Chris Paul's contract as perhaps the worst in all of sports. CP3 gets dealt for Russell Westbrook with picks going out to OKC, and the rest is history because Chris Paul comes back better than ever. I do have a little asterisk here because he did change up his diet significantly, partially why he's able to get back to such an elite form. But he averaged nearly, again, 18 points a game, only 6.7 assists per game his 1 year in Oklahoma City. Obviously, the talents around him was a little bit different. And the style of play there in OKC was different with Schroeder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Then 5 rebounds a game. So his rebounds ticked back up. And look at the splits. 49% from the field, about 37% from 3, and again, back to that 91% from the line. Chris Paul, after a serious down year, a year that changed everyone's perception on him, he bounced back with more recovery time from that hamstring and a diet change. Now, that diet change I do think is important to note, but I think most specifically, giving someone that long of a recovery time is very, very important to player health and specifically their burst. We saw in 2018, 2019, Chris Paul wasn't getting by guys at the same consistency. He didn't look like the same player anymore, and it concerned everybody. And then the next year, flash forward, we know how great he was in OKC, gets traded to Phoenix, makes a run to the finals, of course, doesn't win one. But then again, this past year with Phoenix as well has looked really phenomenal as they head toward a Game 7 with Dallas. And then 2021 playoffs, part of the comparison time here, James Harden at age 31, so 1 year younger than Chris Paul. When Chris Paul sustained his injury, also sustains a serious hamstring injury in the postseason. And remember, this was the series against Milwaukee, where the series before he lit up the Boston Celtics and Evan Fournier. He made Evan Fournier look unplayable and really got to the rim whenever he wanted in that series. James Harden, that year when Brooklyn acquired him, was back in the MVP running with how dominant he was for the Brooklyn Nets that season. Then let's look at that year. He averaged 24.5 points a game, almost 11 assists per game. Of course, his play style changed. The year before this one, he averaged nearly 36 points a game for Houston. And then, there was that massive change where he's now playing along KD and Kyrie, changed his style up, which he's one of the few players in the league that can do that, go from averaging 36 points a game and lead the league in scoring to the next year leading the league in assists at nearly 11 a game. Not very many players can do that. Averaged 8 rebounds a night on, again, very good splits, 47% nearly from the field, 36% from 3 with some of the toughest shots in the league, and 86% from the line. Very good numbers. And then we roll it to this season, where after that injury, we're seeing a noticeable decline, very similar to Chris Paul's, down to 22 points a game. So nearly a 3-point per game drop. Chris Paul went from about 18 points to 15 points a game, 10.3 assists a game. So the assists per game stayed the same. Again, stylistically playing fairly similar again, with a guy like Joel Embiid, of course, earlier this year as well with the Nets. His Nets tenure this past season, obviously questionable at best, I would say. And then again, nearly 8 rebounds a game. So his numbers took similar drops to Chris Paul's with, again, a hamstring injury. And it's identified again by the splits. 46.6% from the field down to 41. 3-point percentage dipped dramatically. And the free throw shooting stayed about the same, which, it's free throw shooting. It doesn't really move that much year to year. And then Harden's next year stats, those are yet to be seen. But everyone here, everyone that probably clicked on this video, everyone in the national media is going to be telling you he's going to be terrible. I don't buy it. Chris Paul had a massive improvement with more rest time, more recovery time. Harden has a whole offseason here. He has from now in May till October to be ready to play basketball again. Those are 5 months of serious recovery time. And I was very adamant about mentioning Chris Paul's diet change. James Harden needs to make some type of change, whether that's his lifestyle, the way that he's going into training camp a little bit overweight every year. He does need to do a little bit of stuff here to get back to where he was. But the idea that he's just gone forever and we'll never see an explosive player who can get by players like Evan Fournier in the perimeter, that is a ludicrous thought, because we saw Chris Paul do this exact same thing about 3 years ago. And I'm telling you right now, sleep on James Harden at your own peril. I am not going to be in the group of people that do that. Now, would I want to sign up for a 5-year, $260 million max contract with him? Probably not. But at the same time, do I think next year he's going to be really good? Yes, I do. And this is the issue here with the national media specifically. They all recycle the same beliefs because a lot of them are friends, they're colleagues, they all get along, they go on podcasts together, they all say the same things. And I understand why. There's a ton of recency bias, and it's hard not to live in the moment and see the most recent thing you saw and look at it and say, this is who this player is now. I get it. Did James Harden look phenomenal this playoffs? No. Did he look like he used to? No. But the idea here is that a 32-year-old player can't get back to who they were as a 30-year-old player is ridiculous to me. I think he can. We're talking about a very serious hamstring injury that he sustained very late in the season last year because it came in the playoffs. Give him some time to recover. And again, there is an onus on him here to actually take advantage of this time off, get his body right. Go look back at who he was in Houston, and you're going to see a much slimmer James Harden. And I think that's not a coincidence here that we're seeing issues with him blowing by guys on the perimeter. At the same time, we're seeing a little bit of a bulkier James Harden. He needs to slim down a little bit. I'm talking 5-10 pounds. That can be the biggest difference in the world. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it really does matter, specifically at the NBA level where you're a pro's pro. You have to be in tip-top shape, and those 5 to 10 pounds could really be the difference here for James Harden. And all of national media right now, Bleacher Report, you're going to see it on TNT, Charles Barkley, all these guys are going to say that James Harden's terrible, that he's not the same guy, he's only a playmaker. By the way, he's still an elite playmaker, even while recovering from this injury, so he's going to be a valuable player on a team anyway. But I'm telling you, he can still score 25 to 30 points a game in this league. Trust me on this, okay? This past year, where it felt like he played terribly, he averaged 22 on not efficient scoring. He progresses a little bit back to the mean, a little bit more recovery time. We'll see his shooting splits go up, and all of a sudden he's averaging 26 with 10 assists a night. I promise you, do not quit on James Harden. I'm going to die on that hill. Do not quit on James Harden right now. Now, when he's 36, 37, 38, it's going to be a different story. But when he's 33 years old, I believe James Harden's still a very good player in this league, and I think you should as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please just keep this in the back of your mind. Again, I understand that the mainstream media here, everything you hear right now is going to be essentially crapping on James Harden. And I think some of it's warranted. You know, he did set himself up for this a little bit by requesting for 2 trades within 24 months. And also just the way he's kept his body not in shape specifically. But I think going forward, get a better trainer, really focus on his body, and I think he's going to be just fine. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. Like and subscribe if you did. Also, leave me your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.